Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Fairway Performance Podcast. Today I've got a guest with me from the US again, a guy by the name of Andy Galpin, or Dr. Andy Galpin, who works at Cal State Fullerton University over there. And he is, in my opinion, one of the world-leading guys with in terms of muscles and just knowing about muscles and training and how we can create adaptations in the body or impose a stimulus on the body and create adaptations to favor our golf or whatever sporting endeavor we're going after. So, Andy, did you want to, I've already done a little bit of it for you, but did you want to quickly say good day to the audience and, just give them a bit of a background of who you are and sort of why you started doing what you're doing and where you're at?
Sure. I'm a full-time professor and scientist. That's my real job. So I run the Center for Sport Performance at Cal State Fullerton, as you mentioned, which is a research center dedicated to performing and disseminating research on anything we think can enhance human performance. So we've got a multitude of laboratories in that center. We've got, exercise physiology, biomechanics, strength and conditioning, human performance. One of my labs in particular is called the Biochemistry and Molecular Exercise Physiology Lab. So this is, we're looking at anything from force and inputs into the ground. In fact, we have a golf swing lab that my colleague Scott Lynn runs, who's worked a lot with swing catalyst, and he's been the biomechanist for that for a long time. So we have people always in our labs coming in, swinging on multiple force plates and doing stuff like that. So all the way to my stuff, which is, blood work, to muscle biopsies, looking at cellular, molecular, even genetic components to human performance, kind of all up and down the spectrum, sports psychology, brain training, biofeedback, all of these things in the Center for Sport Performance. So that's my technical day job. In addition, I teach courses in the area of sports nutrition and program design. And then I've worked, in addition to that, I work with professional athletes, and I've been working with athletes in probably 13 or 14 professional sports at this point, including, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, PGA Tour stuff. I've got, all pros, Hall of Famers, MVPs, Cy Young winners, gold medalists, silver medalists in multiple sports, a ton of world record holders. Right now, the number one player in the world in 4 of the major American sports in America. Some guys on the LIV Tour, a bunch of guys on the PGA Tour, and a bunch of things. So we're at a pretty high level with professional athletes kind of across the thing. And then as well, we have a whole other wing for executive non-athlete clients stuff. So working mostly with athletes, that's where I've spent most of my career. But more recently, again, we've opened up those executive programs. And so we help all you normal folks as well, in this case, get better at golf and not be so terrible.
If they choose to listen to the advice that you give, that is.
Yeah, it's fine. They're going to pay either way, so listen to it or don't.
Fair call. And mate, what got you into that? Like, obviously you went to school and, something drew you towards that. Like, what was it about it that drew you in? It's obviously not a job that you fall into for a paycheck or because your parents push you into it, like a doctor or a lawyer, or a dentist or a lawyer. So what got you into that?
I come from a small town. Nobody I knew grew up had a PhD. In fact, nobody even knows what that is where I'm from. So there's nothing like that. For the most part, people didn't go to college where I'm from, period. So let alone get a master's degree. So I grew up playing sports. I played every sport, and it was just sort of like, how can I get a job in sports? And maybe I was going to be an actual sport coach. So I played football, baseball, and basketball. Was good enough to go play college football. So in that process, it's sort of like, what do you want to study while you're here? Do you want to study athletic training? Do you want to study things like public health? And I didn't want to do either one of those things. I didn't want, no offense to athletic trainers, but I didn't want to tape ankles, and I didn't want to worry about obesity prevention. I don't give a fuck about those things.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't know your language requirements on here.
That's okay. I'm Australian, so it's fine. It's
totally,
just another word.
Part of the normal. Great. I just didn't care about those things. And so sort of just like, how can I make myself a career when I'm working with athletes? But that. So I got my undergraduate degree, finished playing college football in exercise science. And then I went and was a strength and conditioning coach for NFL players, Major League Baseball players for a little while, and realized I don't want to actually be a full-time strength and conditioning coach. So then I went back, got my master's degree in human movement sciences, started competing in Olympic weightlifting and combat sports, and started coaching athletes in those areas. And then was still like, hey, I'm 4 years old or something. I'm used to being poor. I can keep being poor. That's fine. So like, why don't I just stay in school? I don't know what I want to do yet, and all those things. And so I got a PhD in what's called Human Bioenergetics.
Yep.
And I just figured, honestly, the more I know about muscle physiology and human performance, it's only going to help. And it just gives me more years to sort of mature. And it wasn't changing my lifestyle that much as it was. So I continued competing myself, and then continued working with more and more athletes, particularly fighters. So I finished that, and then got my colleague actually was opening up a position out here at Cal State Fullerton. It was sort of like, we want someone who can do molecular and really more advanced basic science, but in an applied fashion, like with strength conditioning. And that's like literally exactly what I was doing. I was doing muscle biopsies, but I wanted to do human performance research. So it worked out perfect. And then I got here and then started working with more and more UFC fighters, and then some world champion boxers. And then sort of once that thing opened up, Major League Baseball players started coming, and then NBA guys, and then golfers and things like that. So weightlifters, powerlifters, all those things. So that's kind of how I got going. But I mean, the honest answer was just sort of like, hey, dude, can I find a job in which I don't actually have to like be a strength coach or anything like that, but I can help human performance and just like give people an edge, if you will, particularly for the Olympics. 2016 was a big deal, like getting people ready for the Olympics in the sports that maybe didn't get a lot of attention. So women's wrestling and things like that. So it was dope to watch those people, help those people. Some of them won Olympic gold medals and things like that. So turned out pretty well. And then it's sort of the income, the average net income of the athletes just started to rise from there. So
yeah, I hope your income raised as a byproduct of that also, because you're obviously doing a great job with
slightly.
them.
Yeah, slightly.
Good man. It's good to hear. It's really great to hear that you followed something you were passionate about and just got really bloody good at it. Like they all got really bloody good at their sports, and your income and level of notoriety and everything among those people has risen just like their careers in their sport. So that's really cool. And I've been following it for a long time. So thanks for sharing your story and your journey there, mate. Obviously, we're talking golf, or like I run a golf fitness business. I work with, or I've done the TPI certifications, which you've had a big part of in the power course. And it's why I wanted to reach out to you to ask you some more questions about the content that you put in there, and just further my knowledge, and also further the knowledge of my subscribers of my app and the followers of the podcast and things like that, because I think there's a lot to be learnt from some of the things that you'll tell us today. So firstly, in starting out, when we look at programming for any sport, obviously there's specific demands for that sport, and there's specific things that we need to work on to make an athlete better at a sport, because I'm sure the training you do for the UFC clients is not the same as what you do for the guys on the LIV tour. They're probably very different demands for those sports. So when looking at golfers, what are some things that you're looking at? Like what stuff do you immediately start looking at or test on the athletes so that you can see where to improve their performance on course?
Well, the big picture is we start every athlete this way. We actually start every human this way. And my philosophy is this. You need to have the highest functioning physiology possible to perform at the highest level possible. So whether you're going to use that body to perform on a golf course, making decisions about your business, being an NBA player, I don't really care. And so for me, it's always physiology first. It's technical stuff different. So we don't do any of the technical coaching. So I'm not going to coach a PGA Tour guy on how far they should take their backswing back or anything like that. Like that's just, That's a skill thing. That's a strategy thing. That's not what I do at all. This is why, though, I can work with and have had success with athletes in so many different sports. I don't need to know a ton about the skill-specific training. You need to know enough, but not much, right? What I need to do is look at your whole physiology and say, how can I get this thing functioning at the highest level, so then you can use that to go practice more effectively, to recover more effectively. to keep your energy on the back nine, to stay focused on 13, 14, 15. To do that when you're in Augusta in August, to do that when you're in Carnoustie, I need you to be able to do this in all formats, right? I need you to do that at Torrey Pines and Pinehurst, and then I got to be able to do that in Dubai and all over the place, right? How do we handle travel? How do we handle humidity and temperature? Like that's where we get the high level precision stuff. So our model is we do extremely high level analytics at the very beginning so that we can give you very high precision, low difficulty programs. And so what I mean by that is everyone comes in and we want to know four basic things. I want to know everything that goes in your body, everything that comes out of your body, how that all makes you perform, and how that all makes you feel. And so what that means is everything that goes in your body. So we need extensive, detailed information about everything that you eat. Where do you get your water from? What type of shampoo do you use? All that stuff. I got to know what's going in your body. Number two, what comes out of your body. So we run advanced testing, full extensive blood panels. I want to know sweat, urine, saliva, hair, and stool. And I can get unique metrics out of all of those things. So if it comes out of your body, I want to know what's going in exactly and then how it's coming out. So how well is your body extracting nutrients or not? The whole thing. Then from there, how do you perform? And so now this is when performance testing, probably more like what you're thinking about, comes into play, right? So this is everything from your metabolic flexibility, so your ability to use fats or carbohydrates at different times, to your vertical jump, to your club head speed, if this is a golfer, to what's your smash back. And this is where we would actually combine with sport coach. Like, what is the weakness? Is it ball striking? Is it just losing focus on the course? Interesting. Different solution, right? Is it backswing? Okay, well, if, in the case of like, hey, if it's a swing mechanics thing, it's not really my realm. If it's though like recovery, I can't practice enough because I'm too shot the next day. We had actually one guy who's on tour right now, just started with me, and he's basically like, the whole thing that's been holding me back the last 2 years is his frequent back pain. So I don't even care about anything else. We got to make sure his back doesn't hurt because nothing matters if he has to pull out of the tournament. Yep. So things like that. So we're trying to figure out like what is that physical thing that limits you. Others, it's been like honestly their cardiorespiratory fitness is not high enough, and even if they're at 60%, but over the course of 5 hours, that's too high. So we need to be your fitness to be higher so that your relative effort is lower, so you can actually perform better. You can do more practice rounds, whatever the case may be. Yep. And then the last one is how does that make you feel? So subjective performance, sleep, all that. So that's our general system. And then what we do with all that information is we try to find what we call performance anchors. So these are like the 1 to 5 things that are dragging you back the most. And so that's what I mean when I say very detailed intake. So we can get very precise, but actually a small number of interventions. So your whole program might come back and you might need to take a multivitamin and do a breathing drill, we tell you. Like it can be that simple, right? It could be much more complex. You might have a very extensive nutrition. All of our nutrition programs come back with their micronutrient base. So it's not only what to eat, but it is exactly, you need spinach, you need, Swiss chards, and you need a banana. Not an orange, you need a banana, right? It's like high precision stuff like that, whatever the case, or the inverse, it doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
And so we're going to deploy any solution we need, whether this is sleep-based solution, whether this is hydration, whether it's supplementation or food, or anything else that we could possibly do to figure out, again, what's going to move the thing the most, because athletes only have so much time. And a mistake that folks make often is like, there are so many things they can do. They just give them all to somebody. And then the person's left being like, I don't know which one to pick, which one to emphasize. Like, this is too much. There's no way. So we make that choice for you. And we're just like, we just need you to do A, B, and C. And then next month it's different if it needs to be, or 3 weeks from now we'll progress, we'll add it, we'll build this in over time so that 6 months from now everything gets done and you've reached highs you've never ever known before. But we have to be able to do that in a way that you can actually execute. So that's sort of the beauty of our program is, again, our opinion is if you spend a ton of money and time at the front to figure out exactly what's there, then we're not spending any time or additional, a couple of tests here, a couple of tests there. But the biggest thing is time. We're not just going to go run experiments and figure it out. We're going to get it all figured out at the very beginning, know the exact solution, and just take guesswork out of it.
Yep. Yeah, but it's a big investment in terms of money, I'm assuming, because there's lots of tests and time that you're spending to find out all these results, or outsourcing that to multiple labs and people to help. But then on the back end, there could be not that much time actually needed to implement some of the things. Like, it's simple, really easy stuff.
Yeah. It sort of depends on like how you want to view it, right? Because in general, again, this is with the professional athlete model. It's sort of like, you're probably going to end up spending about that much money anyways.
Yeah.
And do you really want to wait 3 or 4 or 5 months? Your whole off season's gone. And you've missed how many tournaments? You played poorly.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just get it all done? You're going to end up in the same spot, and we could just get there quicker.
Yeah.
That's pretty much usually what takes. They're like, yeah, I'm tired of messing around. Like, I just got another answer. So that's what we provide.
So that's obviously in a perfect world with athletes that you're working with. For the general population, the client that I work with, let's hone in on the physical thing. So when we're looking at the physical attributes that we can change in a person to make them better for golf, and not talking about the sport-specific ones like changing the swing and those types of things, I also outsource that to someone who's better, which is a swing coach. A PGA professional is going to help with that much better than what I can. What I can do, though, is I can make that person jump higher and throw further and, swing it faster. Maybe not hit it straighter, but swing it faster so their swing coach can help them hit it straighter. So I've just obviously said a couple there, but what are some markers that you measure for golfers, or would you measure for golfers to then try and make physical improvements for those things?
It's hard to answer, honestly, because I can answer it, but it wouldn't be the most honest.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what I mean is, it's so dependent upon the person. So we really try to figure out is what's their limitation.
Yep.
And then we go from there. So for example, we could look at something like a vertical jump test. Is there a relationship between vertical jump and club head speed? Probably. But is that relationship perfect? No, not even close. And so it's sort of like, if we look at any number of tests and go, okay, your vertical jump is 10 centimeters. I'm pretty confident that if we get you jumping higher, you're going to swing faster, right? Like, no, but
Correct.
if it's like a pretty good one, then like I might not even waste time on that, because I could say. The other thing is sort of like, if you're trying to say hit the ball farther, it honestly might not be your biggest deal to your fitness. Might be like, if you can't ever hit the club head square, it's sort of like that time actually might be better on you just hitting the ball. You'll hit it farther by just hitting the goddamn ball in the middle of the club. Like, that's going to matter more. 100%. And then like we can come back and do it on something else. So it really honestly like depends. It could be even on the physical side, it might actually be, hip extension, velocity, or power. It could also be the fact that, again, you're getting hurt all the time. And so really this is just about core stability or posture. Like, it could be any number of things. So we really just try to figure out like, what is what we call the defender. What's the defender from you? And it's not just, instead of just like saying, you're all going to get more powerful, we're all going to do sprint speed, we're all going to do this. Like, we may not need it. It may not be that big a deal. So we're trying to figure out what is the actual thing stopping you from hitting your goal. And then even just within the fitness component side of it, it's more precision than that. So it really depends. This is where everything from like a basic movement screen to a questionnaire, just like, you injury free, your ankle always hurts. Interesting. Okay, like your big toe's purple after practice round. Okay, great. Like, what's happening there? How are you breathing? Your mouth breather? Is your belly mechanics off? Like, all that stuff really honestly goes into our equation. And then it's just sort of like, hey, we might be able to help you, or you might need to improve your power a little bit, but really your breathing mechanics are so bad, we need to spend our time there, because that's going to have a bigger impact overall in there. So that's sort of how we approach things. I know that's like a non-answer answer, but that's the reality of how we look at it. Is we're trying to figure out like, what is that most important thing for you to work on.
Yeah, cool. It answers it in a non-answer way.
It's my most honest answer. Like, that's the most honest thing.
Yeah.
I actually say.
Yeah, one of the things, because obviously I can't spend a lot of time with people, and people aren't investing as much money with me, is one of the things that I do if I'm looking to increase a golfer's speed, and training is the route that they want to go down to improve that, because they literally swing out of their shoes to try and hit the ball as hard as they can, and the most they can do is like 95 miles an hour, which is, it's not quite an LPGA Tour player level. A male swinging that is like
Sure.
not quite an LPGA Tour level. So I'm like, cool, like power is a limiter. If we can get that to, 100, 105, 110 miles per hour during some swing speed training, or trying your hardest on the course sub-maximally, when you're actually trying to hit the the club face square, you're probably going to swing at 100 to 105 miles. So the approach that I generally take, and I'd love to hear your take on this, is I just adopt overspeed and overload training with that person. So I get them doing speed work and strength work, like 3x3, 5x3, 5x5, all that stuff, and the speed training, and just do them both, because I don't have the time to test someone on, whether they're more fast twitch or slow twitch or whatever. So if we just hit both things, we'll generally find a person will start getting diminishing returns in one of them, but the other one, they still just keep increasing. So is that something that you have seen before, or like you're sort of nodding like in agreement there? Like, is that a good approach, or is there other approaches that you've seen work in a similar situation? Or
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic approach. What you're looking at is your force velocity curve, and then you're training all parts of it just to make sure, right? So in the absence of data, that's a very, very, very smart approach, right? So we're going to make sure we get the force side of it, we're going to get the velocity side of it. If you think about speed, you've got two primary components, right? So you've got top end velocity, and you have acceleration. And so what you're doing by that is training both sides. By adding resistance, you're going to improve the acceleration. By adding the overspeed stuff, you're going to go top end velocity. And so you're going to make sure that you're getting both sides of that improvement. And like as you mentioned there, eventually you're going to hit a speed where you're just like, hey, our peak velocity is totally fine, but this is an acceleration problem. And then you just push more of an emphasis there. So I think it's fantastic. It's also wonderful because it's fairly easy to recover from. Injury risk is very, very low. You can do a very high frequency, and it's not going to ruin your golf game. It shouldn't, right? You should be able to still go out and practice and do whatever stuff you need to do. Or in this case, go be a parent, or like other life stuff that you actually need to do without just being totally trash. So I think it's a very smart way to do it.
Yeah, cool. And so just on that approach, like what's a way to break up the week, or how many times a week do we need to be touching on each of those things for, someone who's just starting out? Like obviously we know that for beginners, they need to do less volume and less sets and reps of certain things to get adaptations. And then as we start to become more experienced or mature in our training age, obviously we're needing to get up around, like 20 sets per body part. I know there's like a particular like graph or table that has like the sets and reps, and I think you've talked about it before, but is there, I guess, can you share some numbers around like what we should be looking at when we begin with speed and overload together? And then obviously once we start to get better, if let's just say strength, acceleration was the thing that we needed to work more on, and total velocity was the thing that we needed to work less on. Hopefully I asked that in a decent way.
Yeah. The wonderful part about this type of training is frequency can be as high as you want. So if you go back and kind of think about what's the overall impetus for adaptation, you want to think of speed and power and strength, honestly, as skill development. So just like you'd say, like, boy, how often should I go practice my wedges? Well, the more you practice, the better you're going to get. Right? Like, it's a skill development. So the more you practice being fast, the faster you'll get faster. I mean, that's the fact of the matter of it is. So whether you want to acceleration or velocity, there's no limit to what you can do there in terms of frequency. I would say it really comes down to practical nature, right? So if the client can only make it in 3 days a week, okay, great. But I wouldn't say like physiologically that you need to really worry about doing too much or too little of it. You can really go ham on it. And the more you can do, probably the better you're going to get. In terms of like how much you do per day, just really think about quality. In terms of reps per sets and total amount of sets per day. If it's a good quality, you can keep doing it. And you can do this a lot of ways. This is just using your coach's eye, if you will. But if you have any sort of tech that you're using, if you're using like a velocity transducer or even any video mocap stuff, and you're actually getting metrics on it, then just if you're still going powerful fast, keep going that day if you want. There's no reason to stop, and then come back and do it as often as you want. The only thing you got to worry about really is like, especially if you're doing like rotational stuff, don't do so much rotation that you aggravate a low back or an ankle or whatnot. But you don't have to worry about it. Unlike hypertrophy and endurance training and stuff, it's not really that systemically challenging for you. Strength starts to get a little bit challenging, but this kind of speed and power stuff, dude, you can do as often as you want. So the more better here.
Yeah, cool. And then in a session,
did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then going a little further into it as well, like when structuring sessions, you talked about it during the TPI power cert, was if we're doing like speed, mobility, power, strength, all that type of work, how do you structure sessions? Like which do you put at the start and then which do you put at the end when you're doing all of that stuff together?
So quality is king here, right? So think about it this way. If you're trying to get fast and then you get really tired, are you going to get better going fast? No chance, right?
Yeah. Nope.
So you need to do, in this case, if you really are truly saying speed and power is my priority, then those have to go first after warm up and all that stuff, right? So you need to do your active warm up and mobility stuff and whatever you need to do so you move well. That's first. But then the order you're going to want to go in is based upon difficulty, complexity, and priority. And so in this particular case, almost always this is going to mean speed first in the workout, then power. And sometimes those are actually, the same thing. Like if you're throwing a 4 kilo medicine ball or something, like that's like kind of speed and power, right? Yep. Depending on what you're doing. If you're getting all the way up to like trap bar deadlifts or you're moving around like a 30 kilo medicine ball or something, now you're kind of like getting pretty slow. So you do that next. So speed, power, then strength, and then any hypertrophy or endurance work after all that. And the primary reason is, sorry, apologize. I'm not bored. I don't know what's going on. Well, I know what's going on. It was a very, very, very long week last week.
Yeah.
Just recovering.
All good, mate.
No, the point was, if you're trying to maintain movement quality and efficiency, I mean, think about it. You're trying to teach yourself to move at a faster rate. That's really, think about it. So force is mass times acceleration. So if you're trying to move with more force, you're trying to move the same amount, mass, the weight, and you're accelerating it faster, right? Or if you're looking for power, you're looking at that force multiplied by velocity. And so either way you want to cut this thing, whether it's acceleration or velocity, when mass is fixed, this is your only game, right? This is the only way you get better. And so if you're doing anything that is going to compromise your maximum acceleration or maximum velocity, and therefore you're not training at those areas, and then you're certainly not training to get any better. So any sort of fatigue prior to that is only going to compromise your ability to learn to go faster. The equivalent would be this. If you're trying to work on your 9-iron, and all you ever did was swing your pitching wedge 150 times. It's like, why would you do that? You want to get better at swinging a 9-iron, swing a 9-iron. Like, if you want to get better at going fast, you got to go fast. You can't go slower. How the hell is going slower ever going to make you go fast? It doesn't make any sense. So practice the thing you want to get better at. You want to get better at producing force at a better acceleration, then that's exactly what you have to practice. Anything slowing you down is just taking you off target.
Yeah, it's one of the common things that I get asked with, the people that jump onto my app or the guys that I do movement screenings with and stuff is, if they're going to play golf on the same day that they train, or they want to do like condense their training, because normally I'll do speed training, like speed stick training over speed on a day that they're not doing any exercise. So it'll literally be the only thing they do, which is like 10 minutes of work. Like it's bugger all work that they have to do. But sometimes, obviously, with time constraints and, people having lives and, kids and whatever else, they've got to condense it all. So I'm like, cool, do your warm-up and mobility. Let's make sure it's dynamic, so we're not, doing long static hold stretches and then going into power work, because we're not going to see as good a progress with that. And then we'll move straight into speed and power work and then do all your strength and everything else that we've got programmed for the day. So obviously that's essentially what Andy's getting at, is following that approach, which is what I'm already giving to you guys. So
yep. And if you have to do static
said by the
stretching,
expert.
There's a time when you have to, right? Like sometimes you're just like, hey, if I don't do this thing, I'm going to tweak my back. Okay, great. Just give yourself time in between the static stretching before you start the speed stuff, or make sure you do some speed stuff to reactivate. And that can actually help a little bit if you just like absolutely have to do some static stretching before, especially if it's like ankle or foot related. Just reactivate it. So do something fast, like almost no load, as fast as you possibly can, and that'll help a little bit too.
Okay, cool. Excellent. A couple of quotes that I picked up from, and I don't know whether you use these all the time or whether they were just a thing that you did with the TPI Power Cert, but you talk about training joints through all ranges of motion. So
Yeah.
one of the things that you're talking about in the Power Cert was, with the bicep, if we do a concentration curl, we're moving one ligament tendon across a joint, and we're moving it in a certain way, and we're hindering that one from doing any work, and we're just concentrating on the bicep. So can you just explain the importance of training, all joints through full ranges of motion, and the importance of that, and why we need to do it?
Sure, that's one of my few laws of strength and conditioning. Our default setting is all joints through all range of motion.
Yeah.
All right. With that, everyone's range of motion is different, and there's always caveats. Okay. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the default position is full range of motion. And so whether you want to look at the science of training adaptations, in general, you'll see an equal, if not greater advantage to training over full range of motion than short range of motion. Obviously, don't train over such a range of motion where you get hurt. Or I have a baseball player that I coach. We always do a little bit of a modification for his deadlifting, and we have him do it off of a little bit of a rise. And that's just because of trial and error. It's just like, we've just seen enough times where it aggravates us, so it's fine. We'll give him up 6 inches and just stay away from injury. No problem there. Then outside of that, what happens is you have a handful of muscles in your body that cross multiple joints. So what that means is this. Think about your quadriceps. All right, so your quads means it's quad because there's 4. So there's 4 muscles in your thigh, and all of them come together. They merge into one little thing that goes over your kneecap, comes in the front of your knee, and attaches to the front of your shin bone. That's called the patellar tendon, right? So all 4 of your quads come there. So when I pull a quad muscle, it pulls in the tendon that pulls in the front of my shin that flicks my foot up in the air, right? We call that knee extension. Amazing. So they're all going to cross the knee joint. However, one of them, the rectus femoris in particular, that sits in the middle, actually crosses the hip joint as well. The rest of them do not. So what happens to them is they actually start on the front of your femur, right? So like a little bit down, partial way. So if you flex your hip, meaning you bend forward and you put your chest on your knee, on your thighs, you have not changed the distance of those 3 quadricep muscles because they're only relative to the femur to the tibia. That's all that they care about, right? The knee joint, that's all they care about. However, the one that attaches on the front of the hip, the rectus femoris, has been shortened because literally, remember, it starts on the front of the hip and ends on the shin bone. So it crosses that hip joint and crosses that knee joint. If you bring the hip then closer to the quad, you just shorten that distance. If you were to stand up and do a big hip flexor stretch, this is why we call it a hip flexor, by the way, flexes your hip, right? Then you would be stretching it across that joint. So if you do movements that are partial range of motion and you're flexing or shortening one of the joints, in this case the hip, those muscles that cross both joints are not being contracted fully over both joints because you're shortening it. And so you're going to see problems arise, injuries and other things, because that muscle is going to lack training. Even though you're quote-unquote doing a quad exercise and you feel it quote-unquote in your quad, it may be coming exclusively or mostly, exclusively is probably not right, but mostly from those other 3 quad muscles. And this is where imbalances, injuries, and a whole host of other things pop in. So we have to think about our body as being put together with a little bit of forethought there, in terms of if it didn't want you to go through full range of motion, it would not make them available. And it would not put things across multiple joints. Right? Now, there are certain joints that are better at being stable and certain joints that are better at being mobile. The low back is a good example. The low back is meant to be stable. You're not supposed to have a large range of motion through it. However, if your low back is stable, that allows your hips to be super mobile. And that's the idea. Your knee below that should be stable so that your ankle can be very mobile. And so this is kind of like, I wish I invented this, but it's called the joint by joint approach. It's really, really clever way to think about it. So almost every other joint structure rotates from mobile to stable. So if you go back up, and we'll just go from the bottom, right? So your ankle is supposed to be super mobile. A lot of range of motion in the ankle, but only because the knee is very stable. Any of you that have an unstable knee, you're missing a ligament or something, right? Like,
Yeah.
it flexes back and forth, but it twists a little bit, but it's not meant to do much else than that. So you want that to be stable so that movement can happen in the ankle, and then movement above it can happen in the hips. But then above that, it needs to be stable. And so your low back is stable, your knee is stable, so your hips can move through a whole bunch of range of motion. And then you go up further past that, hips are moving, low spine is stable. Above that is your thoracic spine. Lots of mobility needed here, right? So the low back holds everything in place, gives something to pull on when the hips rotate. If not, this is the rotational movement here we're worried about, is what we often call dissociation. So in the face of like rotation, you need to be able to dissociate lower body with the upper body. That's what allows a big snap to happen and you to have some club head speed. Well, if you don't have the range of motion, then you're going to not be able to generate enough snap and much time to implement force. If you have the range of motion but no stability, then there's nothing to actually pull on. It's too loose. And so you're not going to be able to generate force either. And you run that whole chain up, right? Same thing. Shoulders supposed to be very, very mobile, and elbows fairly stable, and then wrist is basically the ankle for the upper body. So we need to be able to put constraints and control on movement, and training ourselves through a full range of motion is how you maintain and preserve range of motion. It's also by far the best way to increase range of motion, assuming one is doing it not with an absurd load, right? So like, do not go do a max effort back squat in a terrible, rounding your back and feet being out of position. Like that's not going to get your flexibility, but it's going to get you hurt. Yeah. Right. So if done appropriately, moving joints through all range of motion will maintain current levels of mobility and flexibility, and can also enhance them and improve them. It allows you to train more completely across all the joints, which is really what you're looking for. So for all those reasons and more, in addition, the last one is you actually produce more power that way. So that fact alone is probably should be put you in the position of belief, but if not, you have all those other reasons as well.
Yeah. And it's really it's only fairly recently that I've found a great tool for like it's really easy to do loaded mobility with like a Jefferson curl, for example. Like we can load that up, and it's loaded flexibility for the hamstrings, but also loaded mobility for the spine because it's flexing and extending.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty controversial one. I'm fine. You can have your position there or not. I don't really care. But even something non-controversial, just like training an RDL over a proper range of motion, with training ankle over a proper range of motion, and not blocking it at 90 degrees, right? Like all these awful ideas that your ankles knees should never go past your toes, and just like garbage information like that.
Yeah.
It's like you will not find many people who are really knowledgeable in the field anymore that think that the ankle should somehow be blocked and not move forward. So the spine gets a little different, especially loaded with like a Jefferson curl, but the other ones are pretty obvious. Shoulder, with some maybe few exceptions. But I coach one of the best pitchers in the world, highest paid pitcher, Cy Young winner, and we train that shoulder through full range of motion, and he does not get hurt. So
there you go. It's one of the tools that I've found really good for loaded rotational mobility has been I've used the WhatsApp strap, the yellow strap that hooks onto a cable machine, or you can hook it around bands. It's amazing. So it'll like you can wrap it around yourself in different ways, but essentially if you wrap it across your body, you can have it pull you into further rotation through the thoracic.
Oh, okay,
so it's
great. Yeah.
So it's loading mobility through that, and then obviously counter rotation or anti-rotation. You're pulling yourself back the other way,
Sure.
So strengthening obliques or whatever else on the other side. But it's been an amazing tool. Like I've never found anything like it that can train rotational mobility like that, do all the Russian twists and side bends you want, but this thing hands down just kicks everything's ass. So have a look at that actually. If you haven't used it, what's that strap? You'll love it.
Love it, man.
Excellent. The next thing, and it's good that you said the Jefferson curl was a little bit controversial. because you said there's no single perfect technique or variation that exists in any movement. So did you want to elaborate on that? And is this Andy's second law of
Yeah, well, it's not the
strength
second one,
training?
but it is another one.
It's law, yeah. It's the
There
second
are
of
no,
a few laws.
in my opinion, there are really no true bad or wrong exercises. There's only bad or wrong implementation of an exercise, right? So an exercise is either too heavy, you did it too much, you did it with bad technique, or you made it so complex that it compromised technique anyway. So, yeah, there's no exercise I throw permanently off my list. Now, certainly, in context and situations, there are exercises that are generally less useful. And other ones that are generally safer, right? So, like, I'm not going to suggest that a dumbbell one-legged snatch has the same safety profile as a seated bench press machine. Like, okay, let's be realistic here. Of course,
Yeah.
there are gradients here. But I use that not to be that specific, but more to be like, think about it. Like, think about the reverse hyper. It's a fantastic exercise and just, would technically be quote unquote a bad exercise because your spine is not neutral. I mean, there's 100 of them we could think of. So, yeah, I think it's important to understand that it's just like, it's not necessarily the exercise per se, but you got to think through all aspects of what the client needs and the volume and intensity and their background, what they handle and their mechanics. And you just don't throw anything out for reasons like, I just don't do that. I mean, it would be the same thing as saying like, yeah, I just don't carry a 3-wood. Why? It's a terrible, terrible club. Like, well, what? No, like it might be a bad club for you or in this situation or for this course or for this swing pattern, but you don't throw anything out as a swing coach, right? You would say like all clubs are on the table and depending on the athlete that comes in and the situation, well, and then you may say things like, in general, I don't like the 3-wood, but that doesn't mean you're literally going to throw it off the table and never, ever, ever use it. It just means like it's not your first choice, typically. So
Yeah.
that's how you think you should think about exercises.
Yeah, I mean, every exercise is like a tool in a tool chest, right? Like if we've got a huge tool chest and you see an athlete come in, you're not so dogmatic that you'll rule out specific ones for specific sports. You'll take the person as they are and you'll say, this is what you need, this is where you're lacking and your limitations are. What tools can I pull out and, extract the gains for you to get better at this thing? So,
what's your limitation? What are we trying to train for? What are we doing here? And then is it actually best for, your situation?
So one of the things that often comes up with that when I say, we're not going to throw any exercise off the table, like my golfers will lift heavy, we'll do some hypertrophy for muscles that are, potentially underdeveloped, or if they're a beginner trainer, I'm not going to throw them into 3x3 or 3x5. I might do like 6 to 8 weeks of 8 to 12 reps of specific exercises, like a full squat or a full deadlift or things like that. The load's not too high. They're doing lots of repetitions, so the skill is getting practiced, and they're building muscle through that large range of motion, and they're building mobility while they do that as well. So then when we start going to sets of 3 and 5, obviously they're in a much better position. But some people will see all those things and they'll go, well, I don't need to lift heavy for golf. So what would you say to those people? Like, why, I obviously sort of know some of the answers here, but what's the reasoning that you would give for why someone would need to lift heavy for golf and from your experience?
Well, injury prevention, number one. Yeah, I mean, you want to stay healthy, you want to stay on the course more. You want to do that for years. This is your easiest path, without a doubt. Number two, if you don't lift weights, don't lift weights. Just keep doing what you're doing. Good luck.
See where you get.
Let's see where you are. I mean, there's a reason. There's a reason guys on tour are doing it. There's a reason guys in every sport is doing it. There's a reason all the girls are doing it. It's like, there's a reason here, right? Like, you think you outsmarted that system? So you're going to be less injured. You're going to be on the course more. And then, geez, what happens if we increase your club head speed? I mean, look how many guys have done that. Look how many guys and stories have put on 5, 10, 20 miles per hour in the club head speed. And look how that changes your game. You're going up a club. Like, so now you're hitting 7s when last year you're hitting 6.
Yeah.
Like, it's a big deal. So it's also one thing you can control. So getting better at ball striking and stuff is very, 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 very challenging. You just need to put in a lot of reps, right? Like you're just going to have to work a lot. Golf is a really challenging sport, extraordinarily challenging. You can get better at being strong really fast, really, really fast. So instead of waiting a year to see some maybe results, like you can get very strong in 4 to 6 weeks or powerful or whatever you're going to do. And now you've seen those results immediately. So it's a huge, huge, huge win for this community, especially if you don't have a big training background. If you haven't been training a lot, those results are going to come faster and they're going to be bigger. So like, why not take that opportunity to do something that's going to make you a lot better really quickly?
Yeah.
Seems to me it doesn't make a lot of sense.
The injury prevention one's big as well. One of the things that I'll often say to people is our training should get our body to be able to exceed the demands of the sport, because if our body is able to exceed the demands of the sport, then we don't get injured. Sure, if like looking at your jumper, if you're a UFC fighter and you get punched in the face or kicked in the side of the knee, that can cause an acute injury. Sure. But what we're more talking about is like overuse injuries or breakdown injuries, like from just doing your sport over and over because your body just can't handle that volume or load. So, swinging a metal stick at 80 to 120 miles an hour into the hard earth is there's a shitload of force there, right? So if we're not strong and training our grip, doing things like deadlifts and carries and throws and pulls and all that sort of stuff, then like that'll be one site for it, but then it's going to reverberate through the body in some way, and we're going to see it show up somewhere else. Not to mention the swing.
In addition, why not get less tired in your round? If you're stronger, you have more fitness. That's just how it works, right? So every time you go to swing the club, it's less energy because it's a lower percentage of your maximum effort.
Yeah.
Every time 100%. You're walking, it's easier for you. So you're going to have more energy towards the end of the round.
Yeah. One of the other things I get is, and it is so frustrating for me as a coach, and I'd love to know how you deal with it with your athletes. Although your athletes are spending a shitload more money and you're a lot more highly acclaimed than what I am. Just some dude from Australia telling them what to do. But
I'm not much different.
One of the things I get is I'll program like a medicine ball throw, like maybe a step change medicine ball throw. So they start with their feet together, they step to the side, and then they throw it. Similar to like a mini Happy Gilmore, if you want to say it like that,
sure.
without a runner. So they'll do 4 reps. I'll move pretty quickly, and they'll go, I didn't really feel it. Like it wasn't that hard. So I just added an extra 4 reps. So I just did 8 per side instead of 4 per side. What are these people losing? Like what are they sacrificing to do more reps and feel a sweat? Like what gains are they missing out on there?
Okay, it would be the same thing as if we went to the range and we were trying to work on hitting our driver, and we wanted to see if we can hit it in the fairway 9 out of 10 times. And you said, hey, look, that wasn't kind of boring, so I just hit it as fast as I could 25 times. And your coach would look at you in the face like you're an idiot. It's like, did any of them go in the fairway? Oh, no, I didn't worry about that. I just swung hard 25 times. So 25 is better than 10, so better, right? Like, obviously that doesn't work. In the scenario you laid out, again, remember the intention is to produce maximum power. So if you're not producing maximum power, you're getting nothing. And of course, the example of trying to hit the fairway 10 out of 10 times, if you're not hitting the fairway, or at least trying to, then it's useless, right? So you have to think about what you're trying to accomplish. Then you have to do that. So if you're doing it for more than 4 or 5 repetitions in a row, you're going to get some amount of fatigue, which means the power production is going to go down, which means you're not going to develop power because you're not trying to produce higher velocity. Or you're not actually producing higher velocity. If you want to practice and have the ability to lead the tour in average drive on a test where you swing 10 times as fast as you can in a row, well then great, keep training that way. But until that event shows up on golf, you better figure out how to hit something very hard one time.
Yeah.
That's how golf works, right? It's not a contest of like who can swing 10 in a row and hit the par of this one. It is, you swing once, ideally, very hard, ideally, and then you get like a 5-minute break at minimum. Because then you're going to be walking, and you're going to have some... That's the sport of golf, right? So get much better at going 100% break, 100% break, 100% break. Repeated, ideally, 150 times or something, counting practice swings. Like, that would be ideal. If you're swinging more than that, then we're having some other problems. So it's not a good day at the office.
Yes. And like I fully appreciate, like, some people listen to this and go, well, I didn't know that, I was meant to do 3 sets of 4. So there's a little bit of onus on the coach to explain it's why I include I explain program guides, and I have program guides or descriptions in there to say speed and power is trained between X, Y, and Z reps. We need to be sticking there, even if it doesn't feel like it was hard. As long as we're moving with max intention, it's fine. We can measure.
Okay, so let me throw this to you.
Yep.
I didn't realize it was going to work because it didn't feel hard. That's a very fair thing. Okay, great. The framing is wrong. All right. Do you leave your practice when you go work on your wedge out of the bunker? And do you walk out of there going, oh, fuck, that was so hard. I'm so exhausted. No. You walk out of there like, do you walk off the putting green exhausted and sweaty? No. Like, you're trying to get better at a skill, right? You might be a little tired because you're out there for an hour, whatever, right? But the goal of getting better is not fatigue. That's not what we're after here. We're trying to get better at a certain thing. In this case, if you want to get better at, getting your fairway bunker work, or your greenside bunkers, par save, whatever you're doing here, this is high skill. It's high rest. It's taking a swing, watching it, looking back, maybe watching the video, talking to your coach, walking through things. Okay, try it this way, feel this, okay. And you're just trying to get better at a certain thing. That's what's speed is the same thing. Like, you're trying to get better at that. So that's why it should feel the same way. It's not a workout. It's not an endurance test. Like, it's there. If you will need to get that, if you're like, hey, I need to get a good sweat and I need to improve my fitness, that's totally, totally, totally cool. You just do that afterwards.
Yeah.
Just like if you wanted to finish the round and you're like, I got to go get some stuff, and you want to go do some sprints after you did your putting, fine. But those are two separate things.
Yeah. I think the fitness industry has a lot to answer for with people not feeling like they've done a workout unless they've had a hard sweat. So it's something that people like you and I just need to talk more about, and people don't know what they don't know, essentially. Cool. One of my good friends actually asked this question, and I own a CrossFit gym in Sydney, and that's been my main business for the last 9-ish years or whatever. And one of the things that we've found is that we've obviously reached a point of like really diminishing returns with a lot of the training that we're doing. So he wants to know what the how does he continue making gains, like, as your training age like significantly increases. You've done lots of we've done lots of sets and reps of different variants like power, speed, rotation, this and that. What are some things that, like, as athletes are progressing to the higher level or have been doing this for like 9, 10, 12 years, what are some tweaks that these athletes potentially haven't thought of that they can add to their program? Or I don't know, any advice that you would have for that, like going back to the start. Have you experienced this before, or was that a good question?
Well, it's hard to know because there's a lot of
lots of answers
here, right? Yeah, like my default answer to go back to the beginning of the conversation, which is like, well, let's just make sure physiology is supporting gains. Well, first of all, like, are you actually training hard? Number one mistake, are you actually utilizing progressive overload? That is almost always the case when I hear things like this. And you look back and you're like, oh, you're not using any type of overload. That's why. Like, you're not going to expect to see gains with overload. And then after that, it is more things like that's like, well, what's going on under the hood? Something is, maybe you have a micronutrient deficiency. You got a fungal overgrowth somewhere. You got sleep compromise. Like, something's not there. Or if it's just like you're not training hard enough or consistent enough. The other thing to think about is potentially some volume. Like, you may just not be getting enough volume and not as much as you think. I'd say those are the ones that would jump out to me as probably most likely to explain, hey, I've been training for 10 years and I'm just not making a lot of progress. Either, again, you're not overloading like you used to. Number two, you're not being consistent enough with your training. Number three, something is happening inside of you that lacks optimization. And so we would go there.
I would say all three of those things apply in this situation. He's got
Well,
three. He's got three boys. Doesn't train as much as what he used to. Doing 4 to 5 sessions a week. It's now 2 or 3 to 4 sometimes, with golf mixed in. Obviously, golf takes a lot of time away from training, and so do 3 kids.
Sure.
And then volume, because the consistency with training is not there. So the volume obviously isn't there either. It's hard to fit 4 sessions worth of work into 3 if you're just training for the same amount of time each of those 3 sessions. So
totally, yeah. And then also you have to figure
nail on the head.
Yeah, you got to remember too, allostasis, like an allostatic load. That's all real. That's a fancy way of saying like all stressors in your life count, right? And so previously, when you had no kids and you were 28 and all these things, it's like great. Well, your stress bucket's pretty empty. Well, now your stress bucket's pretty full. So the little stress you're adding from training is now you're already overflowed. And so now it's like, well, hey, you're probably sleeping poor and all the other things are going on. So you need to either enhance recovery or you need to take some of the stress buckets out of there that don't need to be. We call these hidden stressors. So there are visible stressors like alcohol and sleep and things that you see and you feel. Then there are hidden ones, like the stuff I talked about earlier, like heavy metal that's floating around. Some of these things that are happening that are putting stress in the system that you aren't aware of, that you can't see and you don't know. So we can come in and get those things cleared up, and all of a sudden your total stress bucket is emptied a little bit. So now you can fill that up with more training, or as much training, you get better results. So that's actually goes in our adaptability score and that whole metric we do. So it's something like that. That's typically the case. But to back all the way down to the beginning, usually it's just you're not actually training that hard anymore.
Yeah.
You're not doing enough. Like that's typically the answer.
Yeah, and like those 3 things that you said, I think, a very, very large percentage of the population is going to be experiencing that once they get to 30, 35 years old. Like they're all going to be things that they're, doing. They're not single and young anymore, so, they've got a partner that they're devoting time to, or kids. Their career's probably, a little further, like yourself. You're doing a shitload more work now and working with a lot more people, so your training time has probably come down a bit too. And it's just more responsibilities, so I think maybe just resetting the expectations around it. Just on that, actually, like to maintain, like, if you've spent 10 years building, like how much volume do you actually need to maintain that sort of a gains? Like how many times a week would you do strength or speed? Like can you just do 1 session a week of like squat, deadlift, bench, and then 1 speed session and you'd be able to keep it? Or
like preserving muscle mass is easy. You lose about 1% after the age of 40 per year. So it's not that hard to keep muscle. Losing strength, it's like double that. Somewhere between 2 to 4% loss. Losing power is like 8 to 10%.
Yeah, wow.
And so that tells you like speed is the hard thing to maintain of the equation. Muscle mass is not. The strength, because it's half speed, or it's a large part speed, is therefore hard. So I would certainly say you don't have to do much to keep your muscle mass on. You don't have to do that much to keep your strength on, but losing your speed and power is going to go down fast unless you do something fast.
Yeah, and that's over 35, isn't it? About 35-ish is
something like
when
that. 35 to 40 years old, is when that's going down, depending on the person.
Yeah, that's the general number that I've heard for speed stuff anyway. Cool. And then the last thing I wanted to ask about, just to not take too much of your day, is just with mobility and stretching. So one of the so when I do a screening with someone, they often ask like, how often do I need to do this mobility and stretching routine, blah, 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 the same sort of questions. My response to them, and the thing that I've noticed personally, and you can vouch for this or tell me I'm wrong, is I generally spend 15 minutes a day doing a set number of bits of mobility, so some thoracic, some hip stuff, some pelvic rotations, and some dissociation. So I'll do, holding my torso, and I'll move my hips separate to my torso, and vice versa. And I do this most days. So when I go to do a warm-up for golf, I can literally spend like 3 minutes doing a few of those things, and I'm pretty ready to go because my body just always does it. For someone who's looking to gain mobility, is it better for them to attack it in like 3 30-minute sessions in a week, or flexibility, mobility flexibility? Is it better for them to do 3 30-minute sessions a week, or is it better for them to do like 10 to 15 minutes a day every single day? And they're going to notice greater benefit from that.
I would probably choose frequency.
Yeah, frequency. Yeah.
I would probably choose it like, I'd rather do a little bit every day.
Yeah. Is there like some sort of science to back that up, or like research on that? It's just experience with you working with athletes.
Yeah, I don't think you'd have a hard time finding research on that. I think it would be like you think about the physiology of improving flexibility. That's why my head was there.
Yeah.
So it's not often the case. A lot of times it's nervous system reset is the way to think about it, right? So you have to turn off muscle spindles and you have to turn off DTOs and a bunch of these things. Anytime you start thinking nervous system, you start thinking frequency. And that's why I said it. So when you're trying to learn a new skill, that's almost what you're thinking about, right? So you're thinking, hey, you're particularly tight here. I need you to learn to let go in this position, and then you need to do some reset. The other thing you're thinking of is connective tissue. Connective tissue responds to consistency. And so for both those reasons, you'd probably want to be pretty consistent with that. So I would probably lean that way. Albeit, again, no direct research that I'm aware of on those topics, but that would be resetting movement skill. Frequency is usually the game.
Yeah, cool. It's it's something that's it's really hard to get into people's head. They think that, if they just do it like 2 or 3 times a week, it's going to be the magic bullet that gets them better. But I
think you're going to probably get very little productivity there.
Yeah, well, I just relate it to if you want to increase your hips, like you want to work on hip extension, instead of sitting, flexed in a seat. Think of how many hours a day and how much, stimulus you're providing for that seated position or the hunched over position, and how many hours a day do you need to undo that, or what sort of frequency do you need to undo that? So I think once I start talking in those terms, people sort of buy into it a little bit more and understand, sort of why the importance is there. But yeah, thanks. That's a good answer. And then the last thing on that is you sort of touched on it before with like static stretching versus dynamic stretching. So you said if we were to do some like static stretching in our mobility or warm up for a training session and then go into some power, you'd want to move quickly. Why is that the case? And like what sort of best practice there, and what's sort of happening in the body when we do that?
Yeah, so in general, static stretching reduces power output. And so in general, you've got a whole bunch of things happening, but kinetic energy is dissipated in connective tissues, so you're just not going to get there. Pliability is gone. Basically, you've taken a rubber band, and you can imagine stretching a rubber band and holding it stretched for a month and coming back. Well, when you take that thing out of the stretch, instead of snapping back together, it's just going to sort of be there. Yeah,
just be floppy and loose. Yeah.
Right, and so the evidence is fairly clear at this point. Static stretching prior to power and speed is a bad idea. So one would not want to do that if it's a speed and power session. A dynamic stretch would be a little bit better, but the reality of it is like, get into good positions, get warmed up, and then do your static stretching after, or another day, or many hours away from it. So if you want to stretch in the morning and then train in the afternoon, that's fine.
Yeah, cool, awesome. That's all the questions that I had. Now, lastly, where I want to point everyone to all the work that you do, because I think the more people digest and consume your content, the better educated the whole world is going to be on fitness and how to improve their bodies for different things that they're chasing. So, where's your favorite channel to send people, and give us a heads up with that.
I appreciate that. That was a very kind thing to say. Instagram and Twitter, Dr. Andy Galpin are the easiest places. If you want a bunch of free educational videos similar to the content that you paid for and went through in TPI, not the same, but somewhat similar, and lots of other stuff, that's all up on YouTube for free. And then of course you can see all kinds of other stuff. We sort of ran out of time, but I have a sleep company that's the world's most advanced sleep diagnostic for sure, called Absolute Rest. So you can check that out if you're into sleep stuff. And then, of course, our executive program, our rapidhealthreport.com is where we go. And we have a lot of Australian clients, so we can even work down there if need be.
Yeah, well, with the sleep company, is the Australian clients or the executive one?
The executive one.
Oh, wow. Oh,
with all the blood testing and all that stuff I talked about. So we can work anywhere in the world. We got clients all over the place.
Yeah, amazing. You just have different people to contract out for the samples, and it all just the data gets back to you, and you guys work on it.
Something like that, yeah. something like that.
Just trying to simplify it. Awesome, mate.
Get everything out to you and get everything collected and then get it all back here, and then we'll handle it in our lab. So.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you so much, mate. I appreciate your time. And I know that, the listeners are going to gain a great deal of knowledge, so they can't use some of the excuses that they've previously used with me as to why they're not doing the sets and reps and things like that. So, and I'd love to talk more about your sleep stuff and as you progress with working with more, tour professionals on the LIV tour or the PGA tour, and you get more data and learn more about golf as a sport. I'd love to, do another podcast and talk about some things that you're learning with those guys as you go, and maybe even talk about some names one day of those players, because that'll add some credibility to them.
For sure. Well,
cool.
You'll see. You watch them play every weekend. I'll put it that way. I promise.
Yeah.
I promise they're on your TV feed. They're not the ones buried in the bottom. So.
Cool. Thank you again, mate.
All right, dude. Cheers.
Sweet.